Hello and welcome to today's Beyond the Shelf Tween book discussion. My name is Mary Ann Wright and I'm a 4-H area educator with Lincoln University Cooperative Extension. Today we are discussing the final chapters of the book, The Secret Garden. So we have been reading this book for the last several weeks, and last week we were assigned chapters 19 through 27. So that's the final third of the book, and so much happened in these last chapters. So we have a lot to discuss today, and then after our discussion we'll be doing a fun craft. So if we think back to chapter 19, it starts off right after Colin has one of his tantrums. And so from the last discussion we know that Mary has calmed him because she reacted kind of violently to Colin. She really let him have it and told him exactly what she thought of his tantrums. So we start there in this discussion, and we know that Dr. Craven arrives, and he is used to coming and tending to Colin after his tantrums. So he's expecting the worst when he arrives, but when he gets there, he sees that Colin is actually quite calm and enjoying his time with Mary. So he's thrown off and he's really confused by this. At the end of that chapter, we know that Dickon also comes to visit. So Colin has requested for Dickon to come, and he does arrive. And were you surprised when Dickon came inside the house and he had all of those other visitors with him? So this was something that Colin was really struck by when he arrives with all those animals. But of course, Dickon just has that quality where Colin instantly took a liking to him and felt very comfortable with him. Then we move into the next chapter, and it's entitled, I Shall Live Forever. So this is finally when Colin sees the secret garden. So Colin and Mary and Dickon all plan for Colin's adventure and his outing. And it took a little bit of time, but they got all the details worked out, and Colin has made it to the garden, and he exclaims when he finally gets in there that he shall live forever. So what do you think he meant by that when he said that in the book? Do you really think he thinks he'll live forever? Or do you think he just has this newfound sense of living? Because you remember that he has lived in that small room where it's been dark, he hasn't had any communication, and so now he has this new outlook on life. The next chapter, we discover that the gardener, Ben Weatherstaff, sees the children in the garden. He looks over the wall after climbing a ladder, and he sees Mary, and he is outraged. And what is your opinion on why he's so upset with Mary? He told her at the beginning that he had this secret garden and that no one was allowed in. So do you think he's just upset because she has gotten in and is exploring, or do you think there's more to that? Then it develops, and we know that Ben then sees Colin, who he's never seen out of the house before, and this kind of throws him off, but he instantly is kind of speechless when he sees Colin. And it's alluded to that this is because Colin does look so similar to his mother, and it's revealed in the next chapter that Ben had a relationship with Colin's mother when she was living, because she was so kind and she liked Ben and she loved the garden, and so they really had a connection there. And so now Ben is seeing Colin for the first time and really seeing Colin's mother in his eyes. So that is really fun to see, and we get to see a whole new side of Ben because we've never seen this tender side, and he really seems affectionate with Colin. Even when Colin is being rude and talking down to him, he takes it all in because he just seems to be happy that Colin has enough strength to actually yell at him. And we know that Colin is so put off at the beginning with Ben that he is determined to stand up and really show Ben who he is. And that is a turning point in the book, because up until this point we weren't quite sure if Colin was even able to stand. So after this, we know that he does have the ability to stand, and now he actually has the passion to do that. So then we go to the next chapter, and it's entitled When the Sun Went Down. So we know that Ben admitted to being in the garden. And when he's having this conversation with the children, Dickon is not surprised. He knows somebody has been in the garden and has pruned the garden and really helped to cultivate it over the last 10 years. He just didn't know who. So Ben reveals this, and he said he hasn't been in a couple of years because his bones are achy and he's had to climb the walls for the last 10 years because he wasn't sure where the key was. So now that Mary has found the key, he has a way in through the door. So he's also very excited about that. So I want to know why you think that Colin's standing is such a turning point and why it's happening now in the book. So we've seen Colin start to change his attitude in recent chapters, but a lot of his physical characteristics have not changed. So this is the first time we're really seeing him make an effort to use his muscles, use his limbs, and start to get healthy. Colin also references magic. He thinks he is getting well, he is getting motivated by magic. And he references this several times in this chapter and then also in the next chapter, which is called Magic. And I want to know what your thoughts are. What do you think this magic is? It's said that Colin is convinced that this magic is a belief that if you start to think it, you can do that. And so he's determined to have this scientific discovery and become an athlete, become a scientist, and grow old. And he's determined to do that, and he says through magic, he's going to do it. So it's sort of like he has the will now, and he's going to make it happen. So this is interesting because lots of times in life, this is true. If you are not motivated to do something, it's not going to get done. But if you have the will, if you're determined to do it and you work hard at it and have a positive attitude, oftentimes we can do amazing things. So chapter 23 is all about this discovering of magic. And then we go to the final chapters and we see Dickon's mom appear in the story. She is filled in on the secret of the garden and the secret of Colin. She's also filled in on Colin's newfound ability to walk and his strength training. And even though they're keeping this a secret from all the other adults besides Ben, they now let Mrs. Sotheby in on this discovery. And she actually visits the garden, and she has a different perspective on magic. In one of the chapters, it's talked about in the context of God. And so they ask Dickon to sing the doxology. And if you go to church or if you've ever been to church, you most likely have heard this sung. And it's recited in the book, and anytime that it has God, it's almost like this replacing of magic. It's sort of this interchangeable word and feeling. And so we know that Dickon's mom talks about, she doesn't refer to it as magic, but she does believe that things are, grown and cultivated for a reason, that things happen, that this willpower will kind of have this magical quality because it can really change things and make them magical. So I thought that was a really neat way to incorporate this idea of magic and just creation into the story. Now, the final chapters of the story, The Secret Garden, has come full circle because now we have Colin pretty much as well as any other just regular kid, and he wants to share this information with his father. So he cannot wait for his father to get home from traveling. We know that his father is also in a very dark place, just like Colin was, and really like Mary was at the beginning of the story. And now Mary and Colin have both had this transformation, and now it's time for Mr. Craven to have his own transformation. So this finally happens in the final chapter of the book. And he is away, but he has a dream, and then he receives a letter that says he needs to come home that something is happening in the garden. That's where he'll find his late wife, and he needs to report back home. So he goes home, and kind of unexpectedly, he meets his son, and he sees that his son is able to run, and he looks very healthy, and it's just this really kind of great conclusion to this story, because now the final piece is in place, and you have the notion that things are just really going to work out, and everybody's life has changed for the better in this story. So I hope you enjoyed The Secret Garden as we read this for the last several weeks. I hope you had a few parts that really stuck out to you. One of my favorite quotes from the book I thought I would read, and it says, "At first, people refuse to believe that something strange and new can be done. Then they begin to hope that it can be done. Then they see it can be done. Then it is done, and the whole world wonders why it was not done centuries ago." So I think this is so true, and even for small things, and if we can see that. So like cell phones. Most likely your whole life you have known people with cell phones, but even in your parents' lifetime, they were not around. People might have thought of them and hoped that that kind of technology would be there, but it wasn't. And then if you think back to your grandparents or your great-grandparents, they might not have even understood the concept of cell phones. They couldn't even dream it. So the initial thing is to have this dream, have this hope, and then work towards it, and then anything can happen, almost like magic. So thank you so much for joining me for this book discussion. I have really enjoyed reading it. I used to love the movies, The Secret Garden. There's several different movie versions, and I used to love this as a kid, but I had never read this book, and especially as an adult, so I enjoyed it immensely, and so I hope you did too. Moving on to our craft today, I thought a great way to end our series was to create some beautiful flowers, because the Secret Garden is now in full bloom at the end of the story. It's in the height of spring into summer, and we know that there's just colors everywhere. So today we are going to be making some paper roses. And the only things you need for this is a pair of scissors and a glue gun. And then you're going to need some colored cardstock. So I'm using some shades of purple and pink, and then some green for my stem. Now what you're going to do is you want to get a square of cardstock that's about 6 by 6. And I'm using this because the paper I have is from a book that comes in 12 by 12 sheets. And so I could easily quarter that and use 4 different pieces to make 4 separate flowers. So you can adjust your sizes to however you would like them, but I chose to do 6 by 6. After you have your square, you're going to make this into a circle. Now your circle does not have to be exact, so I'm not going to draw anything, but I'm just going to remove and round out the corners of my piece of paper. So do that just by cutting off each of the corners and making a rough circle. So then you're going to have something like this. The next step is to spiral this. And so you want to have about 1 inch in width as you spiral around. So I'm going to start from an edge and then just go around my piece of cardstock until I get to the middle. And so you're going to have something that's similar to this. So just a spiral. Now the next step is to scallop and make a design around the edge. This is going to give your flower a little bit more of a realistic look. So I'm just going to go around the outside edge of my spiral, and I'm just going to make a scalloped. Now again, this doesn't have to be exact, but you just want to go all the way until you get to the middle of your paper here. Now, depending on how you cut your spiral and cut your scallop will determine what your flower ends up looking like. So this is a fun way to play around with the different textures. But now I have a spiraled edge. So the next thing I want to do is cut off this pointy piece. I don't really want that. I want it more of a flat, and I want it closer to an inch when I start. Then all you have to do is roll your paper. And you want to do a really tight roll. So you start here at the outside edge, and you just start to roll your paper. Now at the beginning it might not roll very easy, but as soon as you get a few layers in, it will start to be easier to roll this paper. As you're rolling around, you want to try to stay as close to the straight edge as possible. So you want that to line up. So your scallop edge on the outside won't necessarily line up, but you want to try to keep that interior line in line with the roll. So you keep going until your whole paper is rolled and you're to the center. And when you get to the center, you have sort of a piece that's rounded, almost a circular piece here. And that's exactly what you want. So then I'm just going to fold that over. And then since I have my tight ball here, I'm now going to release it and let it uncurl just a little bit, so it's not quite as tight. So just let that breathe and come out. You can even use your hands to uncurl it a little bit more, because this is going to be the shape of your rose. So you can play around with it before we glue. And gluing is the next step. So when you get it looking like you want it to, you're going to take your glue gun and you're going to add some glue right to the base of this piece. And then you're going to take that and take your flower and press it down to that base, to that hot glue. So you have that. So it's almost on a little stand here. Now, once you do that, your rose is going to be complete. So you're going to come up with something that's very similar to this. And again, you can play around with the scallop. So if you made tighter scallops, it might have more of a succulence effect. You could even do a pointed scallop, and that would give a whole different flower. So with this little nice little scallop, just that's a smooth wave, it looks like a rose. Now once you get to this point, you can do a lot of different things with it. If you want to go ahead and make a stem, all you need to do is have a piece of paper that you cut into about a 2-inch strip. And then I like to use a skewer to start my roll, but I just start on one corner and roll my paper. And since you're starting on a corner, it's going to go diagonally, and you're going to get more of the length that you want for your flower. So just keep going until you've used your whole piece of paper. And then all you have to do is cut a slit in the bottom of your flower, and you can insert your stem here. So here's one that I did earlier. It has a stem on it, and it's just a really pretty flower. You can make several, and you can add them to a jar or a vase to display. You can also use these roses to decorate. So I decorated a picture frame, and I included a quote from the book that I really liked in my picture frame. So it says, "I am sure there is magic in everything." So I printed out this, just typed it up on my computer and printed it to put in this frame. And then I decorated my frame with 3 roses. And I think it just looks really cool, and I'm going to have it in my room, and I'm going to look at that quote and think about this book, and I'm going to believe in magic. I really hope that you enjoyed our discussion on The Secret Garden. I have enjoyed reading with you. We are going to pause our Beyond the Shelf activities for summer because we are going to participate in the summer reading program. So I encourage you to check out your local library. The 2020 theme is Imagine Your Story, and we're going to have a lot of different activities and books that we read as part of that. So be sure to check back into our Facebook page and YouTube channels for all the updates on upcoming events. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you keep reading this summer. Bye-bye.